Welcome everyone to BS3 Radio Live, and we have a special show on tonight with a very good friend of mine. We go back since elementary school. My man Derek Jackson, now Pastor Derek Jackson, also Arthur Derek Jackson. Why you waving at like one of them kids? Milk boxes?
I'm excited. I'm talking to my friend. I'm on a podcast. I'm excited, man.
But how you doing tonight?
Man, I'm good right now, bro. It's been a couple of days. We just moved into a new house, and already stuff is starting to act up. I got a hot water heater not working. They just dropped off our washer and dryer, and I can't get that to work. So we got dirty clothes and dirty bodies right now. So
I hear you. I just moved recently, as you know. So
yeah,
you're trying to get everything in. You're in between two places. It gets real. It gets real interesting. So I definitely understand where you're coming from there. So man, you've had a very interesting week. Your birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
The book "Don't Get Married Unless." Let me scoot to this side. You see that "unless" right there? Make sure you get that part in there. The book was released today. It's available on Amazon. You'll be able to find that. So just for a minute, talk about how this let's back up. So me and Derek have known each other, like we said, since elementary school, probably 5th grade, I believe. Is when me and him and a couple other of our friends, Tyan and Trina, when we first ran into each other. I don't really know how it happened, but it happened some type of way. We've been friends ever since. But so kind of talk about the us growing up. Is there any stories you want to share? Anything you remember, kind of an icebreaker, if you will, before we get right into the interview portion?
Man, my wife is about to make me trip. She I didn't see. I know she was behind me. I didn't know what she was doing. She put a chair behind me, and I was about to back up and lose everything. But no. Interesting stories. My favorite story about all of us is the day we all skipped school, seniors cut day. Yeah, that's probably my favorite story out of all, because the interesting thing about that day, and I don't even know if you remember it. So, we went out, we were going all over the place. We were, malls and stuff like that. So we get back and to the school just to be there for the end of class. And Trina goes in before us. Trina and a couple other friends, they go in before us. Trina's mom is already at the school waiting for her. So Trina's already getting in trouble. And, we all call her mom, so it was like we walked in, Tyan and I walk in after Trina's already getting scolded, and we just kind of back up because we don't want her to see us. So we're thinking we're getting away with it. I go back to my car to drive home, get to down the street where that KFC is in Emeryville, and my car just dies on me. So yeah, so I had to, Tyan, that's why he's still my buddy today, man. He pushed that car all the way to my grandmother's house, and then I, of course, got in trouble then because, so we all got in trouble that day. I just thought I was getting away with it, but it ended up costing me like $1,500 to get that thing fixed.
Yeah, we all thought we were getting away with it, but that was definitely a fun time, man. One thing I remember, I don't know why I still remember this, but I think it was at Annie Aches, and when you was like, you came up to me, you was like, "Yeah, let's rap for a minute." I was like, "What's rap mean?" It was like talk. I was like, "Oh," so I mean, like we was teaching each other stuff, man. But we go back, so I wanted to kind of set that. But the book, "Don't Get Married Unless," I think number one, it's a great title because obviously marriage is it's a huge step. It's not something that you should take lightly. It's not something that you should just say, "I'm just going to jump into it and do it." But talk about how the concept of the book happened.
So my wife and I, we celebrated 13 years in July. So when we first were talking about getting married, we went through premarital counseling. You know, I told my pastor at the time, he's passed on now, but I told him that we wanted to get married. And when we talked to him, he told us that we needed to go through premarital counseling, that he would, you know, I didn't know that pastors got paid for doing weddings and stuff, but I guess they do get, you know, you get a stipend for doing the wedding. He says that he never asked to get paid for a wedding, to perform a wedding, as long as the people that he's marrying go through the premarital counseling, and he will not marry anyone unless they go through premarital counseling. So, you know, we wanted to get married, so we went through. Now, I was thinking I was going to go in and, you know, this is my wife, my girlfriend at the time, she about to learn everything she's supposed to do. The wife is supposed to do this for the husband. You know, I'm the head of the household. She's supposed to do whatever I say and all this. But it was a rude awakening, because about 75 to 80% of that class was about what the husband is supposed to do. And so he really set me straight on that. And it was just a lot of good material that he gave me, but it was just over years of him collecting things. So I said, well, why haven't you never wrote a book about this? And he just said, oh, you know, it's just, I don't really have the time to do it. Maybe I'll do it. So when I got into the ministry, that was one thing that I tried to do with him. I tried to say, okay, let's write this book together. You got a lot of the material. I'll write it and, you know, format it to where it needs to be. And at that time he began to get sick. And he just was never able to do it. So the last marriage counseling session that I did, he started that session, but he was not there to finish it, you know. And then the last session that he was in, he looked at me and he said, write the book. Wow. And so this was 2018. And so I started putting everything together, writing it. He passed away in January 14th, 2019. And so I just kept working on it. I sent it to a few different agents. And so the beginning of this book, it was probably over 200 pages. It was over 30 chapters. It was a pretty long book. And so the feedback I kept getting from agents was shorten it, you know, and then get a better title, because the original title was The Gift About Marriage, or The Gift of Marriage, or The Truth About Marriage. And they were just like, yeah, those are nice titles, but they're boring. So,
sure.
You know, shopping it around, I, you know, toured it around with other people, and, you know, came up with Don't Get Married Unless. Yeah. So that's how we get to the book.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's definitely a title that catches you, and you're like, oh, but then when you see unless, so that unless part is extremely important, because you need to go through some type of counseling, some type of conversating on what maybe the standards are, what do you want this marriage to look like? Like, there's a lot of conversations that need to happen, because it's not just a simple let's just go to the altar and say I do.
Right.
So what does, or why is getting married a long-term commitment that needs to have, you know, well thought out conversation and dialogue?
Because in this world that we live in, bruh, it's people care so much about the wedding day. You know, you have people that, and they say it's just women, but I know some guys who have their ideas on what they want their wedding to be like. But people spend so much time saying, you know, I want to get married. What's the wedding day going to be like? And they forget that after the wedding day is over, there's a marriage, and that marriage is lifelong. So if you don't have the tools to handle things that come up in marriage over time, then the marriage is going to fall apart. And that's what we see a lot today, is why marriages, you know, after a year, 2 years, 3 years, they begin to start having issues. They may go to counseling then, but by that time, those issues have magnified so much that counseling doesn't help. And then within 10 years, these marriages have failed. But if you go through the counseling, the steps first, then you know what to expect. I went and got my driver's license when I was 16. I went through the classes for several weeks, got that license, took the test, got the license. Now I've had that license since then, but I remember everything, all those rules and stuff I had to learn when I got that license, and they've carried me over all the years. So if you're going to get a marriage license, you need to go through some classes first. Learn all you need to know to navigate the road, this rocky road that is marriage, so that you can, have a good record.
Yeah. Yeah, that's real, because it's not just a piece of paper. It's a commitment between not only each other, but also the Most High. It's not just a thing where you just say, this is just between us. This is a commitment, not just about paper, but about who you're committing to. And I think that's an extremely important part of it. But yeah, it's not just once I get married, everything else is all over with, and I can just you can just put it on autopilot. Because I think another interesting part, as we talk about long-term commitment, is the commitment of getting to know your spouse even after that day, because things change. So if you want to touch on that for a minute.
Well, at first I thought you were reading the chapter in the book, because I talk about that specifically, almost verbatim of what you just said. It's a long-term commitment. It's really a covenant that you're entering into with your spouse and God, with others as witnesses. So it's a covenant relationship. And if you know anything about covenant relationship, it's like a binding contract that you're making that cannot be broken and should not be broken. Otherwise, there would be some major consequences. The Bible says that the two shall become one, and that's one in every sense of the word. So they become one spiritually, emotionally, sexually, all of this. They become one flesh. So if you try to separate that one flesh, you can't do it without damaging both of them. Yeah. And so that's why you need to be serious about this covenant that you're entering into. And when you say you're entering into it with God, that should be a red flag for you right there to say, oh, I really need to take this serious if God is involved in it. Because most people just think, oh, I'm just marrying this woman, but no, or I'm marrying this man, but no, you are entering into a covenant relationship where God is supposed to be the head. It says that the head of every man is Christ. Christ is the head of the church. That means he's the head of you. So that means he's the head of your marriage. And if you don't have Christ first in your marriage, then you don't have the correct direction or the correct leading in your marriage from judgment.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And that's one thing that me and my wife really talk about a lot, because there's going to be rocky times. There's going to be times where you're not going to agree. There's going to be times that you're going to argue. There's going to be times where you frankly don't like each other. So to be able to get through those times, you got to have that thing to lean on, which is the Most High, and which is the Word, because the Bible, because that's how you're going to be able to understand and navigate these things and not let it end up in a road of divorce or infidelity or what have you. So, man, it's these are things that we've talked about, and kind of an interesting part of it. One of our together friends that we have, Adam and Karen, I'm gonna shout them out by name, but they were kind of the first ones in our clique that got married. We were all like, wow. And it seemed like they were like 19 and 20. I think they were around that same age. So we were all like, wow, this isn't like, what's going on? Like, we didn't even know that y'all was this serious. So that was kind of the first group. And then I think it was me, and I wasn't even, that's not like I was planning to do it that early, but when you love someone, you're willing to definitely take that step. And everybody was like, you sure? I was like, yeah. I mean, what I have to lose? It's something that I want to do. So I think it's counseling is 100% important, premarital for sure, because you got to talk through things. Now, what are some myths about marriage, which I think we kind of touched on a couple of those.
Myth number one: the fairy tale ending. Because when we talk about the fairy tale ending, it says they live happily ever after.
Yep.
And then it says the end. But when you get with that person that you're with, that's just the beginning. Right. There is no real happily ever after. So what those fairy tales forget to mention is what happens the first time that Prince Charming leaves the toilet seat and she falls in. What happens, when they have their first argument? What happens when one of them wants to squeeze the toothpaste from the middle and the other one squeezes it from the bottom? What happens when all these other issues come up? What happens when you have children? How do you discipline them and raise them and all these things? So it's not really a happily ever after. It's a growing for life with that person. You guys grow together and you go through changes. You touched on it earlier. You're going to change. We're going to change over time. So that's one myth. There's another myth that I want to touch on that I know a lot of guys are probably going to dislike me about, but the whole try it before you buy it mentality that we have, it's like, no, I got to know what it is before I, commit fully. I gotta, for lack of a better word, hit it a few times to know, what it's going to be. And what I have found, because I've said it, before in other interviews, I didn't enter into my marriage as a virgin. And so I'm not going to sit here and act like, be a hypocrite or anything. But I will say, once I found my wife and once we came together, it was different than any other person I'd ever been with. And one of the reasons is because we were able to be open and honest with each other about everything. And so we were able to grow in each other in every way. So if you're open and honest and communicating with your spouse, those issues of whether it's sexual, whether it's just something that you don't like, a pet peeve you have, whatever, those things can be talked about and worked through in a marriage. So that's a huge myth that this world pushes, is that you have to have sex before you get married. And that, to me, I don't think that that's the right message that we should be sending, because again, the Bible says we should not fornicate. And that's one of the things that we need to start learning, is that if I'm going to be with my wife, I should be only with that person. My pastor said this really interesting fact that really messed me up one time. He said that during a men's meeting, he said that every woman that you have been with and did not marry, and then she goes on to marry someone else, you committed adultery with that woman because that was not your wife.
Yeah, that's real.
That messed me up. I was like, oh, so.
Yeah. And you think too, let me give a couple shout outs here. We got my man Al High. Thank you for tuning in. If you guys got any questions for Derek, you can definitely put those in the chat. Also, Big Illinois. We have Janelle Map. She said, "Let get it." She said, "Let get it."
Yeah, that's my sister, man. She her and my brother are dating right now.
Awesome. Yeah. Marcus. Shout out
to
Marcus.
Yep.
But I think it's that's an important part, because I think there is a mentality of like, hey, let's try it out first. But I think too, a very important point is that when you have relations with somebody, I'm taking it back with an old word, if you have relations with somebody, that there is some intertwining and a connection there, like that. I don't know if you ever really, if you may not ever get over it. You may not ever be forget that experience or that interaction. So there's a connection that happens when you have sex with somebody. It's not just like people say you have a one night stand, but I don't think it's just that you do it and it's over with. There is like ties there, soul ties. Marcus is saying, I think that's true.
Yeah, and that's something that my sister Janelle has been trying to teach me about soul ties, because I hadn't heard about that before. I mean, I've heard about it, but I had never really paid much attention to it. So there's mom right there. I see her. Yeah. But yeah, so there is a connection. And like you said, you don't ever forget those experiences. I can sit here and say, oh, no, man, it was only ever my wife. That was the only person I've ever been with. Those things still pop up in your mind, and they come up sometimes in the most awkward, weird moments and stuff. So, but they do come up. There is a connection. You might see that person, or you might, especially with social media where, you can see posts from people all the time. Those things come up all the time. So yeah, there's definitely a connection, a type of soul tie or something where you have with the person. So we must be careful. And so I tell people that ask me what should they do about, if they want to have sex with this person before marriage. I tell them I would wait, but we know how our society runs. So I say, well, look at it this way. Is this a person that you can see you spending the rest of your life with? So are you actually going to marry this person? Is this a person that you can see yourself having a child with? Because that's a strong possibility. Is this somebody you want to gamble with maybe possibly having some type of STD or something like that? And is this going to affect your relationship with God? Because when we fornicate, when we do these things, that separates us from God because we're out of fellowship. And now you have to go back and confess. And how many times you going to go back and confess the same thing? Hey, God, I did it again. Hey, sorry, I just had to do it. But are you really sorry? Because if you're truly confessing, you're going to repent and turn from whatever you were doing.
Right. Turn from your wicked ways. Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's real. I mean, that's so I think it's very vital to, like we're saying, get with someone that you can have these type of conversations with and not just jump into it. Because a lot of people, myself, I mean, me and my wife, we got married. We didn't go through any type of counseling. And I had never lived, I had a college roommate, but I never lived on my own. So there was a lot of kind of going through struggles and going through frustrations and things that we went through. Not to say you're not going to go through that even when you go through counseling. So let's not say that either. But it'll make, I think the road will be a little bit easier if you're able to kind of have these talks ahead of time.
Yeah, because like my wife and I, when our first maybe 5-7 years of our marriage, we referred back to the things that my pastor, Dr. Reedus, had taught us, because we would run into things that he taught us then, but didn't come up until later on within the marriage. So it's not to say that you're not going to go through these things and things aren't going to come up, but counseling does give you a roadmap so that you can kind of know or spot things that are happening before they become an issue. And now you have to end up in counseling. And to your point, most people don't do marriage counseling before marriage. And that's one of the big issues, is that most people get into marriage, and then when problems arise, then they go to counseling.
Right.
So it's backwards. You should do the counseling first and then go through the marriage. Because even in the counseling, my pastor told me, he was like, my job in this counseling session is to break you guys up. Because if you guys break up over just these few weeks of counseling, then you don't need to get married anyway.
Right. You got bigger problems.
Yeah.
Shout out to Jan Jackson. He says, Pastor DJ. Also, Shonda Williams, a fam. Thank you guys for tuning in.
My auntie also, Jan.
Hi, Auntie Jan. Auntie.
Yeah.
Also, we got a couple of likes. Charles Cole III. We both know who that is.
That's Dr. Charles Cole III.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Orlando Page and James Instill. Thank you guys for the likes there. All right. So, how can people that are going into marriage or already possibly married, these may be some answers for them, but implement healthy decision-making strategies in living a successful marriage?
So if you're going to get into marriage, let me preface it by saying any decision-making you do within the marriage, as I said before, Christ is already the head. So the first thing you guys need to do if you're going to do any decisions is pray. You need to pray, ask for God's guidance, and He will guide you through to the right answer. So that's the first thing that you should do. And then another pastor just recently I talked to, his name is Todd Battle, and I should say Dr. Todd Battle. He did our marriage seminar a few months ago, and he made a very valid point where he said that if you're going to have a decision that needs to be made in the marriage, you need to understand, is this something that's going to take us off of our plan, our family plan? So that brings to the point, every marriage should have a plan. Mm-hmm. You should know where you're going in your marriage. You guys should talk about it and revisit that plan every 6 months to a year. When you first do it, probably revisit it every few months. And then as you're moving forward and get a little more accustomed to where you're going in the plan, go back to it maybe once a year, check off anything that you've done, see what else you got to add to the plan. So if any of those decisions are going to take you off of your plan, like say you guys are trying to buy a house, but then one of you goes out and spends $5,000 on the credit card. Yeah. So that's going to put your debt to income ratio down, and it's going to mess you up to your plan. So is that the best decision? Should we go put $5,000 on this card? Do I need to get a new car right now? Can we get the house and then get the car afterwards? It's just decisions. And it even goes down to the children. How are we going to raise our children? If you're a Christian, are we raising them in the Christian household? Are we taking them to church? Are we one of those parents that's going to say, oh, we'll let them decide and figure it out on their own? I would hope that you would take them to church to build their foundation. But, I know those that say, oh, I wouldn't do that to them. I'll just let them make their decision. So every decision needs to be talked about, needs to be prayed about, and then really needs to be looked at up against your family plan and up against the plan that you guys have with God. Where does God have you going? Right. So if everything aligns, then yeah, go forward with the plan. If it doesn't align, say, okay, not right now, or maybe this is just a no, we won't do this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Shout out to Overton Claiborne. Thank you for tuning in. He is commenting from Vallejo.
You said only Overton I ever knew was Wakefield Jones from Living Single.
Yeah, I know. My parents in the building. Thank you guys for tuning in. Pastor Ron says good teaching. Pastor DJ.
Mm-hmm. So, that's my uncle, my Auntie Jan's husband. That's what I'm calling from now on.
Auntie Jan's husband?
Yep.
You're calling that to his face on Sunday?
Probably not, but I'm gonna say it while I'm several miles away from him.
Oh, you're far away. So the strategies, that's really good points. Definitely praying. I think also I like what you said about planning. There was a pastor that told me one time, you need to, at the beginning of the year, you need to have a budget meeting, or you can say even a life meeting, decide what you want to do, decide what goals you have for that year, decide how you want to, a plan to accomplish them. And that's also including your marriage. So are you going to have date nights on a certain night? Do you have things that you want done? Do you have things that have changed in your life that you maybe want to implement? So that's extremely important. I think we, as people just in general, we go through life sometimes not planning. And then when things happen, we're like, well, I wasn't prepared. So that's like with life. That's with money. That's with marriage. That's with parenting. Parenting is a whole nother thing too, because I want to get your take on this. When you grow up in two separate households, you grow up, maybe you grew up with both parents. Maybe your spouse did not grow up with both parents. I mean, maybe your spouse was adopted. I mean, it's so many different scenarios. So going into parenting, that's a huge, I think a huge thing that can possibly derail. So there's touch on that for a minute, especially with kids and how you navigate that.
Well, let me first just say the planning part is very important because things do change. Like, my wife and I, when we first decided, about planning a family, we talked about, having 4 kids. And because she comes from a household, she has 2 brothers, 2 sisters. So she has a fairly big household. And then she has, with her father, 2 other brothers and 2 other sisters. So she, it's a lot of kids in her family. And her mom, helped raise a lot of the kids in their neighborhood. So for her, having a lot of kids was the ideal thing to do. But then we had 1 kid and we're like, oh, maybe.
Hold up. I'm out.
Maybe that's not such a good idea. Maybe we don't have the patience for 4 kids. And then, when we were deciding like, well, maybe we'll just stick with the 1, then, hey, she was pregnant again. So we decided to, hold off on that. And, now we just have the 2. But with the raising of kids differently, we both came up in different households, different type of households. Her mother was Christian, but her brothers, one of her sisters are Muslim. So she practiced that faith for a while. Then she came back to the Christian faith. So there's still some teaching even from there that you have to kind of, navigate through even today. And so there's just different things that we had to learn with having the kids and how we're gonna raise them, because I was one that was like, you know what, I got whoopings growing up, my kids are gonna get whoopings growing up. That's just what it is. But now today, you put your hands on the kid or something, or you whoop them with something that's called corporal punishment, and they try to put you in jail.
Right.
Honestly, I think that some of these kids, not every kid need a whooping, but some of these kids would have benefited from a couple of whoopings.
From a brown belt, yes.
Yeah. So now I have the thing where I'm like, I see a kid that may have some issues. I'm like, they may need some more base in their home. Like maybe their father isn't around or isn't a part of their life. So they need someone with that bass in their voice that's going to be that's going to scare some sense into them. Yep. But one thing I've learned about the disciplining of the kids is that each kid is different. The same thing I do for my son, I can't do for my daughter. I can't, if I raise my voice at my daughter, she may start crying. But if I raise my voice at my son, he's just going to look at me like, what's your problem? Why are you yelling?
Yeah, he gonna look you up and down like that's it.
Yeah, pretty much. He basically
can I go back to what I'm doing now?
Yeah, so I have to be a little more forceful with my son, not whooping him, but I gotta be like, yo, you gonna listen or it's gonna be a problem.
Right.
My daughter, on the other hand, now all I gotta do is be like, give me your phone, and then she, no, not the phone. So I'm knocking stuff around. But yeah, so that's a different, but yeah, growing up in different households, that is something that you need to talk about, because in your plan, you need to say, hey, this is how I want to raise kids. How do you want to raise kids? Then you got to come to a agreement on how you're actually gonna do it. And that's with everything needs to be planned out. And things are going to change over time. Like I said, the 4 kids went from 4 to 2. At the beginning of our marriage, I wasn't trying to be a pastor or, even a minister. That wasn't my goal. So that kind of came into the plan, which added seminary school to the plan. Right. My wife went back to school at one point. That added something else into the plan. So it just, you revisit it like the guy told you. I think he said a pastor told you.
Yeah.
You revisit it at the beginning of the year and see where you're at, what you need planned, but you should also plan out like, where do we want to see ourselves in 5 years? Where do we want to see ourselves in 10 years? And then if you need to make adjustments, you can make adjustments over time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's it. And kind of back to the kids' point, that's definitely a conversation that you need to have. Growing up in different households. My example, my mom was the one that would handle the whooping. All my dad had to do was just raise his voice, and we was all like, we would snap back into shape. So and every kid is different. That's true. And
yeah, well, your dad got that voice that it just, I mean,
it'll snap you out of a daze in a minute. You'll be whipped back in shape by his voice.
Right.
But that's important when you're married, because kids are an integral part. Kids are going to be there for at least half of your marriage. So I mean, like you have to. That's a huge conversation you got to have, because similar to your story, when we have one, and we're definitely not having any more. I mean, the plan I thought was like 2. I just want a boy and a girl, and I'll be good to go.
Right.
And we had Ari, and the way she came into the world also was not the easiest. So, we're thankful for the one, but that's a conversation too, because some people don't want to have kids at all. That's the conversation that definitely needs to happen. Because if they say I don't want to have kids, and the other person says I want 4 kids, then either you got to compromise or you got to part ways, and sometimes that's hard to do. That's not easy.
Especially if you in those soul ties, because y'all done already started sleeping together. Yeah. Now, do I want to leave her or do I want to leave him? But they said they don't want to have kids. But you got to be willing to say, okay, I'm willing to not have children. I don't want to have children. Or you got to say, hey, I do want kids, so I got to go to that person that find me someone that wants what I want. Right. So yeah, the having kids thing, that's a major thing. But there was a point I wanted to make. You said the kids will be there for about half the marriage. Really, I mean, if you want to be married 50 some years or 75 years or whatever, if you want to make it to one of those goals, which I've seen happen, those kids are only going to really be in the house 18, maybe between 18 to 25 years. Because, until they maybe graduate college and get their own job and house and all that, or place to live, they'll probably be in your home. Yeah. So that's one thing that you have to plan out too, has couples, is that our kids, though we love them, they can't become the main focus of our relationship. We still have to have a relationship with each other. So like you mentioned earlier, the plan, do we have date nights? Yes. You need to have a date night. That needs to be mandatory, because if you don't have a date night, you don't continue to date your spouse, and y'all going to become distant from each other. And once those kids leave, y'all going to look at each other like, who are you?
Right.
And then you're going to be trying to learn each other all over again. So must have date nights, must go away on a trip together or something like that. So yeah, we got to do that. And then I think I lost my other thought. Sorry.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah.
So we're talking to Pastor Derek Jackson about the new book, Don't Get Married Unless. It's available now on Amazon, as you can see scrolling down below. There is the hardback version. Also, there's an Amazon Kindle version.
Paperback, not hardback.
Paperback. Excuse me, paperback.
Yeah.
So, and it kind of leads into another question or topic, is boundaries, and healthy marriage boundaries, which also is involved with the kids too, because the kids can't be in every conversation that you have. Some conversations need to be separate, and there needs to be that privacy. So let's talk about boundaries in marriage.
I'm glad you brought that up, especially with the kids listening into the conversations. Now, I don't know if you remember or not, but I'm deaf in my left ear. My son has a similar issue where he is deaf in one ear. But I tell you this, he hears more conversations that me and my wife are having privately than anything else. And then he goes back and tells people about our conversations.
Yeah.
So we had to really kind of teach him, like, look, the conversation that you shouldn't be listening into our conversation, because he's literally at the door, ear to the door, listening in. Yeah. So we're like, 1, you can't be listening, and 2, you can't repeat the stuff, those private conversations that me and your mother are having. So there has to be some boundaries when it comes to conversations. Those conversations need to be had. Those serious conversations between you and your spouse need to be had. had. My dad used to use this example all the time. You remember All in the Family? I know that was before our time.
Yeah.
Maybe Pastor Ron remembers, because that's when he was an adult, coming into his adulthood. That's just me calling him old in a nice way.
Yeah, I heard that, Dig. Yeah.
But my dad made this point about Archie Bunker, is that all the craziness that Archie Bunker said, all the things that he didn't want to agree to, he never, his wife never said nothing to him in front of people. She would say what she had to say to him, like in the bedroom or in a private conversation with him. And then he would change his thinking in his mind. That's basically like that pillow talk. If you're going to have those conversations with your spouse, y'all need to have them together. Don't go sharing every single conversation with other people, because everybody should not be in your marriage.
Yeah.
And that leaves room for people to give their opinion and their 2 cents in on your marriage. And then, you might, has the wife go tell your best friend something, and, oh, I would never do that. I wouldn't take that. You should leave him. And then then the wife start thinking, oh, maybe I should,
Yeah, start planting that seed. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you the husband and tell your boy something, and he's like, man, I would never let my woman get away with something like that. And then you come back into the house. Look, woman, I told you. And now you sleeping on the couch or something,
Right.
So,
and the other part of it is, I don't like to make generalizations, but sometimes those friends are, number one, not married, and number two, may not even be in a relationship, and they're trying to give you advice. That's the people that you don't need to listen to. You need to filter that stuff out.
Exactly. And even those that are married, you need to look at how their marriage is going and why they're giving you advice. This is one thing I tell the couples that I counsel: find you a mentor that's probably been married, say 25 years or more. Find someone that's been through some stuff that can be a mentor. And if, like I said, if you're Christian, of the Christian faith as well, so they can kind of mentor you. So if you do have like those, little questions or things like, hey, how did you guys handle this? Or did you ever have an issue like this? And hopefully that couple, you are able to trust that they're not going to go back. Or you can go back to your pastor, who shouldn't be gossiping about your business and stuff and going around telling everybody. I don't go around telling nobody else's business. So y'all can, if you want to talk to me about it, I ain't going to tell nobody your business.
Yeah. And that's the way it should be. You should not be passing the information around, because that information is private. You're almost like a doctor. If somebody has something, you're not going to call, or they have a disease, hypothetically, you're not going to call their friend and say, hey, this person has this illness. Like that. Right. You don't do that, because that's disrespectful to the person. So boundaries are definitely important. I don't remember who told me this, but before I got married, and they were like, whatever you do not talk to your family about your business, or don't include them in your marriage, because then they almost feel like they have a say so, or like they have something that they have value that they can add, and like they're a trusted person that could give input. But their input could be damaging. Their input could be affecting you to argue every time you see that person.
Right. Yeah. And I made that mistake, before, early on in the marriage. And so I know not to do that now. And even though there are family members that feel that they have am I getting too loud for you, bro?
No, you good.
Okay. I know that they feel.
I was hearing something. So,
okay.
By the side of the room. No, you good.
Okay. So I know that there are family members still who try to give me advice within, for my marriage, and you take it with a grain of salt. There are some things that someone may say who is wise and who's been married for a while. They may say something, and you're like, that actually is good, or a good point. And so I can take that, but they might have said some other stuff within that to where you're like, no, I'm not taking that back to my family. I'm not taking that back to my wife because that doesn't work for my marriage.
Right.
So, like the things that one husband and wife do may not be the same thing that I do or me and my wife do. So their advice wouldn't work for us. Yeah. But, you take it with a grain of salt. People are always going to have their opinion. They're always going to tell you what you should do. I know there's people that's probably like, why'd you marry, your wife? Why you marry her? Was that the right choice or whatever? There's still people that probably tell her, like, why'd you marry him? I know some of her friends thought, they were like, why are you marrying him? Because my wife, she's from Ethiopia, but she grew up in West Oakland. I'm maybe what some would consider more nerdier. So she kind of, a little rougher. And I'm maybe more a little nerdier or whatever. And so people didn't see how that could work. And as my brother often tells me, I always had an affinity for the hood girls. So that's why it worked for me. But I needed something to balance me out,
Right.
But yeah, so
balance. I truly believe that when you come together, there is balance. There's one person that's maybe the more hard nosed. There's the other person that's more the mediator or the person that kind of smooth things over. Like when you come together, this is another topic. You start to realize what's my spouse's strengths that I don't have, and then you're able to partner together when it comes to this planning we're talking about and parenting and a lot of those things too.
Yeah, I mean that's I know there's a thing where back in the day it was like husbands, you're the only ones that can handle your finances. Well, maybe the husband is a gambler, so he shouldn't be he shouldn't be the one handling the money, or only it's the wife's job to clean the house, cook and clean and everything. Well, I know some husbands who cook way better than their wife. And I know some dudes that can clean or cook way better than their wife. I know some guys that can clean better than their spouse. Who their spouse may be a little messier and they can make stuff neater. So yeah, you got to know what the strengths are in the marriage. That's how you're going to make it work. Now the husband, he is the head of the house. So but that makes him the one that's responsible for everything. So in his responsibility, that doesn't mean he's a dictator. That just means in that responsibility, he should be the one that's seeing, okay, I'm not good at this. My wife is good at this. So let me, have her handle this part. I'll handle this, what I'm better at. Like me, I'm clumsy. I break stuff all the time. My wife has had a job, has worked in property management before, where she's had to go do maintenance type stuff. So she's able to kind of fix some things. So I'm not the handyman in the house. She's more of the handy person in the house. I break it, she fix it. So just know our strengths.
Yeah, definitely. That's major. And so I think it's important to get to know. I mean, it just makes sense to get to know the person that you're planning to spend the rest of your life with before you make that major commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So
before you hop into bed with them too. I'm just gonna bring it back to that.
Yeah, bring it back to that point. Maybe do a background check or something.
Yeah.
You never know. So don't get married unless it's available now on Amazon. Let's go through the book. If you want to give us a couple of or go through the chapters of the book and maybe give us not give us everything, but maybe give us a little something from each chapter.
Oh man, you gonna put me on the spot like that? So, all right. So the beginning of the book, I may not go chapter by chapter, but I'll just give kind of what the sections are of the book, or the flow of the book. Yeah. So the beginning of the book first is going to speak to God's view of marriage. Who created marriage, which is God. He created the first marriage with Adam and Eve when he brought them together in the garden. So when you understand that he's the one that created marriage, you understand that he's the one that dictates and he's the overall authority on marriage. So he's the source. He's the one that we go to if we want to know anything about marriage. So and then I go through what is the barrier between marriage from the garden when Adam and Eve sinned. That created a barrier because if you remember the end of chapter 2 of Genesis, it says they were naked and unashamed. That means they were physically naked, but they were also naked in all other sense where there was nothing in between them. There had been no secrets, nothing everything was open. Everything. That's when I say open and honest communication. I mean being naked and unashamed with that person, with your spouse. Right. So I go through that is why marriage is where it is today. And it's because of sin, because sin has created a barrier on top of a barrier, on top of a barrier, on top of a barrier that has pit man and woman against each other when man and women are supposed to be on the same team.
Right.
So that's the first part of the book. And then I go through the world's view of marriage. And that's where we get into those myths of marriage, the fairy tale ending, the try before you buy it, all those things are in that section. And then I go through the different roles of marriage. So what's the role of the husband? What's the role of the wife? What's the role of sex in the marriage? What's the role of communication in the marriage? And communication is probably the biggest thing for us in marriage, is because if you communicate, if you talk and you're open and honest with each other, you can work through anything, I think. So that's the start, is communication. And then towards the end of the book, we begin to talk about the parenting, finances, the role of finances. And that's a major issue with marriage, is that people come into marriage and it's like, well, this is my money and that's your money. And they don't want to join the money together, because what if you do something with my money or I do, and really, if you guys are coming together and you're really truly becoming one, then everything should be one. So the finances should be one. So you should have a joint account where you're paying all your bills. There's nothing wrong with having like a personal account for your own, like your spending money and stuff. But all of your bills and all that stuff should be coming out of one account. And then at the very end of the book, there's a family plan and a budget for couples. So those are major. You want to have a family plan so you know where you're going. And then I have a budget in there that it's kind of a template you can add and subtract to it, that fits your relationship. But you have a budget because if you're going to have a plan, you need to have a budget on how you're going to execute that plan. If you don't have a budget for it, then you're never going to get to the completion of the plan.
Yeah, that's true. And adding a budget to that is major. I'm glad you did that. A great example of a guy that helps with budgeting, Dave Ramsey. We went through his class, and it was very interesting to go through it and realize how many of those concepts that they make so much sense. But it's like, if it's not being presented to you, then you may forget it. You may not think that avenue. So putting a budget in there is important, because say you are married to that person that likes to spend a little extra money on the way home, or that likes to eat out for lunch or whatever. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff is eventually going to create tension if you're not having those type of conversations. And like we've been talking about, that's a monthly, maybe weekly, whatever you want it to be. But that's a continuous conversation. That's not just one time and it's over. And one of his main things was, you got to have a budget meeting. And when you do the budget meeting, you all need to come together. And that's in getting married, you need to come together, sit down and decide what is it you want to do? Because then what happens is, if one person ends up just doing it and something goes wrong, then you go point the finger at that one person, when it needs to be you coming together, like what we're talking about. So,
right. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up Dave Ramsey. That's one of the reasons why I added the budget, because my wife and I went through that as well. We have our deacon and deaconess who are our married couple. They're over our married couples ministry, Keith and Lene Bullard. And they also bought Dave Ramsey's class to us, the Financial Peace class to us, and we went through several sessions with it. My wife and I, after we went through it, kept coming back to it because we wanted to make sure that we got everything, and so they let us be I don't know, call it coaches or whatever, be a part of it to help teach other people. Coordinators, yeah. So they help us be a part of that. So that is a major thing that we need to do as couples, as just people, really, is to budget ourselves and budget accordingly, and don't go over your budget, and have budget meetings, have an accountability partner. So if you're not married, at least have somebody that you can be accountable to that can help you stay on budget.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to my good friend Kesey. Thank you for tuning in out of ATL. Jan Jackson says budget. ... It's important. That goes because a question that I have for you, we can kind of talk about some of those things that end up breaking up marriages. Probably number one is money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what number 2 and 3 is, but I know somewhere on that list is probably sex is on that list, probably somewhere.
Well, to be honest, sex is on the list, but that's not. And I honestly thought that sex would have been number one. But it is money. One of the things that's coming up that's getting a little above money is just communication. People stop communicating with each other. They stop talking. And once you stop talking, that's when you build the separation, the barriers go up. And if you separate from each other and don't talk to each other for a long period of time, then you end up going in two separate directions. That's why people get divorced. So communication, you got finances, you do have sex, and that's one of the reasons why you have to be open and honest about it, because people that commit adultery a lot of the times commit adultery because their spouse isn't doing what they like, not necessarily just sexually, but they're just not meeting them where they are. They're not meeting an emotional need or physical need or, some type of need for them. And so they find that need in someone else. And that's where that adultery comes from. And you remember God said it's not even, Jesus said, even if you are thinking about,
that's not even the act. This when your mind is
thinking about it, when you're dwelling on it and it's like, oh, let me get that, or how can I get that? You've already committed adultery in your heart.
Right.
And so, I've had to repent on that fact on multiple occasions. So,
that's real. That's real. But keep it real.
But so, that's another thing. And that's why I say the communication is key, because you can talk about everything from sex to, your faith, to, where you guys want to go in the future, to, how you're going to spend your money, what vacation places do you want to go to, whatever, all those things need to be talked about. And that's a part of communication. So it has to be open, honest communication. You got to be naked and unashamed with your spouse. Yeah,
that's 100%.
That's going to be the title of this episode, Naked and Unashamed.
Naked and Unashamed. a part of the Naked and Afraid series. Now, I think one thing, what do you think, this is kind of, it's not off topic, it's not on or off topic, it's kind of in between. But what do you think of these bachelorette and bachelor shows? I really can't stand it because it's not real. Mm-hmm. But what do you think about those?
I'll be honest with you, bro. I've never watched any of those dating shows because, I've seen previews. How you have commercials and stuff.
Yeah. You see the previews, I don't watch
I have never watched any of them because, like you said, I knew it wasn't real. These are mainly just actors who are getting paid to be on a television series. Yeah. So and we all know, and sorry for those listening who don't know, you're about to find out that reality TV is not really reality. If you look at the credits on reality TV, they have writer credits on those things. There are people that create those stories or those scenarios that the people are going through, and then they just tell them, hey, this is your scenario, go do this, or, make sure you do this, make sure you throw a drink, something. So all those dating shows and those Married at First Sight or 90-day marriage or whatever, all those shows, just put a negative light on marriage, which is another reason why I wanted to write the book, because people will look at that stuff and be like, oh, that's what relationships are supposed to be.
Right.
You know, our younger generation are coming up saying, oh, that's what I should strive to do.
Right.
I should strive
that's
to
what
be
it's
on.
supposed to look like.
Yeah. And none of that stuff is real. Even the movies and TV shows that you watch, those are actors. None of that stuff is real. Those are not real relationships. Those people don't really love each other. There are some that we know that have had relationships that started outside of the actual role of the movie, but they're acting inside of a movie. That's not their real life in that movie or television show. So if you really want to look to see what marriage is all about and what marriage is supposed to be, you got to go to the source, and that's God.
Yeah.
You got to go to the Bible. You got to go to the Word. What does God say about marriage? That's the source. Right. So all these other shows, I don't even watch them. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, to me, it's to your point. It's disgusting, because that has zero to do what marriage is going to look like, or even with the courting process. Nobody. I mean, there is love at first sight, but normally you're getting to know that person. And it's not just over a 6-week period on a TV show. So it definitely gives you a false sense. And I'll say, I know a lot of marriages that have gone for 30, 40 years, and they just went to the justice of the peace. Now, maybe they had, like my parents, 20 years in, they had a ceremony, but they just went to the justice of the peace. Everybody is different, but I think there has to be, you got to have that love there before you can start planning some, $1 million wedding. And it's also, you got to, like we've been talking about, premarital counseling, or talking to someone that is not biased between either one of you guys, but you can talk out things and plan. All of these things we're talking about is definitely what you need before you get married or before you sleep with somebody.
Yeah, really. You got to know them. You got to communicate with them. You got to get to know who they truly are before you step into it. But I had a question, man. You said there is love at first sight.
I think it is. I haven't personally seen it, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting with that concept, because when I first seen my children when they came out of the womb, that was love at first sight for me. It was like, oh, this is my child. I'm totally in love with this child. Yeah. So that's love at first sight. Now, I don't know if I personally believe in love at first sight, other than no, I don't really think I do. But interesting story. When I met my wife, or before I met my wife, she came to church. And when I saw her come into the church, I nudged my uncle, the one that's on here right now. I nudged him and I said, I pointed at her and I said, that's going to be my wife. Now, I didn't know her. I hadn't talked to her. I don't think I was in love with her at that time, of course, but there's something about her that God prompted me and said, look, that you need to go talk to her. Yeah. And so part of it was lusting in church, but hey,
there is, that's a good point.
I wasn't in the pulpit yet.
There is lust at first sight.
I think that
probably starts before anything.
I think that's the thing. It's lust at first sight. You see something, you want it, and you want to go get it. That's what it is most of the time.
Right. All right. So Don't Get Married Unless by Derek Lamar Jackson. It's available right now on Amazon, the paperback, and on Amazon Kindle. So any last comments or any takeoffs you want to leave us with as we round it out?
Well, I'll say it like this. My birthday was on Monday. So if y'all want to give me a birthday gift, go ahead and purchase the book. Like my brother just said, it is on Amazon. It is on paperback and Kindle. And as I am navigating how to do these interviews, because this is really my my first kind of dive into it. I want to be someone that when I have a captive audience, I don't want to let the opportunity to share Christ pass. Yeah. So if you haven't accepted Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, I'm urging you to do that today, because never mind, if it's a book, a movie, whatever, the biggest thing I would want for you to do is to accept Christ, is to know for sure that your salvation is secure, that you know where you're going when you leave this place. So I will present it like this. Christ died on the cross for your sins. He was buried, and on the third day he rose, and he is now at the Father's right hand, desiring a relationship with you. So I urge you to make today your day. We don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. We see with this pandemic that people are dying every day, even people that we would think were extremely healthy. There are people dying every day. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't even know what the next hour is going to bring.
Right.
So if you're not certain that you are right with God, I urge you to accept Christ as your personal Lord and Savior today. And the Bible says that if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. It's that simple. You don't have to go to the pastor. You don't have to go to a priest. You don't have to start reading a whole bunch of scriptures. Confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus, believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, and you shall be saved. So I'm going to leave you all with that. Accept him today. And if you have any questions, always DM me, message me, whatever, and I will be glad to talk about Christ with you.
Yeah, because like you said, there's so much going on right now that, and you need to know definitely where you're going, and also you need to know the truth. You need to be able to study for yourself and build that relationship with the Most High. So that's Jan Jackson said, I totally enjoyed. Yeah, this was, we honestly, we were talking about, I was talking about getting him on the show for a while, but he was like, I don't do sports. And I was like, well, I'm starting to venture off from sports. The source is predictable and it's kind of starting to get boring. So I'm glad we'll be able to do this. As you can see right underneath Derek Lamar Jackson on Facebook, Pastor Derek Lamar Jackson on Instagram, and I believe it's Pastor
DJ, Real Pastor DJ
on Twitter.
I know I got to get them all to say the same thing, because that's a little crazy, but I'll fix it soon.
Yeah. Yep. Pastor Ron, the gospel is free. Just accept King Jesus.
Amen.
Yep. All right. So I'm glad we were able to make this happen. Definitely. Oh, I wanted to ask you: is there any future books that you're planning on writing? Is this in a series, or is this a one and done on this particular topic?
Come on, man. You know me. I ain't gonna stop. I'm a writer.
I know. So we just need the people to know.
So so if it wasn't for me going back to seminary and then accepting this call to be a pastor, I probably would have written this book a while ago. But now that I got my master's, done with seminary, and I'm getting into the swing of thing as a pastor, I'm back into my writing bag. So I already got some other stuff lined up. So we're gonna see over the next year or two. We're gonna get some more stuff out.
All right, definitely. Shonda says, I bought and read the book. I'm gonna get the book myself. Definitely gotta support, and also I'm sure there's things in there, because people may say I'm already married, but I'm sure there's things in there that you can benefit from already being married.
Yeah, like I said, my wife and I referred back to that book the first 5-7 years of our marriage. And then we still, even though we didn't refer back to the actual material that my pastor gave us, we referred back to certain conversations that we had during that time, even still to this day, 13 years in. So there's always something for everybody. I wrote this book mainly to give something for those who are thinking about getting married, so they have a roadmap to know what to expect in marriage. But if you are married for just the first few years, or you've been married for a while, there is something for everybody in this book.
Yeah. And I'll say this too: buy the book for someone else. Buy the book for someone that is thinking about marriage, or that is in a relationship.
Thank you. That's a great point. Yes, go buy it for someone, gift it to somebody.
Exactly. All right. Well, this was great. Great to get you on. Make sure to follow Derek at all the avenues. Also, get the book. It's available right now. You can follow BS3 Radio, all avenues of social media at BS3 Radio. This interview will be shared. It's right now. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So it'll be there on all those platforms. And looking forward to getting you on the show again.
All right, yeah, man, we definitely gonna get Tyan and Trina on. We gonna have a real good time. But yeah, I definitely think, I'm sorry it took me so long to finally accept coming on. Because but I'll be on more often.
Definitely. Let's give a couple the shout outs before we get out of here. Big Illinois, thank you for tuning in. Janelle Mapp, Miss Majors, thank you for tuning in. Marcus Jackson, Shonda Williams, Overton Claiborne, Pastor Ron, Key C, Jan Jackson. She comes in the building, the great Antrina.
And Trina's in the building. Miss Pregnancy herself is in the building.
Yes. We are so happy for you, for real. She says she's buying the book today. The world isn't ready for all of us yet. No, they're ready. They will be ready.
Nah, yeah. Let us all get on here, man. It probably be a 3-hour podcast. Let's just
3-hour podcast. Yeah. We're gonna make that happen real soon. So definitely be in touch. We'll be in touch for that. But Tyan, I don't know if he's tuning in or watching. We may catch it later. But yeah, we all of us, this group of 4 of us, we talked about this at the beginning. Grew up since the 5th grade in high school. We continue to talk to each other when good things happen. When not so good things happen, we're always going to be there for each other.
Yeah.
It's going to forever, and we going to laugh the whole time. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of laughing. I don't know how much talking we're going to do, but it's going to be a lot of laughing. It's going to be a lot of storytelling.
Yeah, that'll be a great episode. Tyan got to get away from his 50 kids, for a minute, but we'll get on here.
He got to get away from his 50 jobs. He
dude is doing everything.
Yeah, I'm a full-time bowler. I also work at FedEx. I also make coffee at Starbucks.
Barista in the morning.
Right, I forgot I teach during the day too. We all got our grinds and our side hustles and our major gigs. So, but yeah, this was great, man. Glad to get you on. We'll definitely do this again.
Yes, sir.
Make sure to get the book. It's available right now on Amazon. And we are out of here. Say goodbye to the people.
Bye, people. Thank you for joining.
We will see y'all later.